Yeah, so I may just as well start by defining the spelling my company name. It's Liqvid, not Liquid. So therefore, it is quite solid. VID stands for to know in Sanskrit. It expands into Vidya and Vidyalaya. So Vid is and the concept is the way liquid. You pour water in a tall container, it becomes tall. You pour water in a flat container, it becomes, or any liquid. So the way liquid takes the shape of the container, so we say learning that will take the shape of the learner, or personalized learning using technology. What we do is really focus on English language learning under the brand English Edge. We sort of created instructor support software and a student learning software, which is our approach to scaling the delivery and learning of language, applicable broadly to most areas. So we try to empower the instructor, which is, I think, one of the big bottlenecks to scaling any education delivery, to reach out literally to millions of learners, which is in line with our vision and our mission. So what I'll do today is really, first I'll make a few general points about, skill development. It's obviously been covered in excellent detail and framework by Dr. Jaina as well as Dr. Koshi, but I'll just add my flavor to it a little bit. And then I'll talk about, what it will take from my perspective, from what I've seen, what are the elements of a strong curriculum and program delivery, program effectiveness. Most examples I'll use will be around English language learning, because that's what I know best. But they're generally applicable to a much broader set of learning. So first, I think having come after Dr. Jaina, I think there is, I just want to highlight that there is no substitute to starting early, right? And I illustrated a very, very actually sad example, and it's fortunately only happened once, and I hope it never happens again. But there's this girl, her name, she's nicknamed Jeannie to protect her identity. She was rescued in America several years ago at the age of 13. Her parents, I don't know what kind of parents they were, but they had kept her tied to a toilet seat during the day and tied to the sleeping bag during the night. She was not exposed to television or radio, and every time she tried to speak, her father used to beat her with a stick. Okay, for 13 years, that was her life. And when she was finally rescued, right, so she obviously was taken into good care and, provided a lot of training inputs. But she could never speak properly. She could, her vocabulary and her use of language never exceeded beyond what a very, very young child would have, right? So it was completely destroyed. So it's, really highlights the point, which we intuitively know, that language learning and most of the learning and growth in the brain of of all of adults and children happens in very early age. So I think there is no substitute to starting young, right? But however, we know there are a lot of our countrymen and us who've not had all these skills inputs as we've grown, and we need to become employable, provide something of value. So we need to, so there are ways of doing that. So I think that's one big point. Second point, what has been also mentioned, I just want to highlight, is mindset, right? I think, technology has become a buzzword, it's become a fad, right? Everybody says you can't scale without technology, right? But what does that mean? I don't think there are any questions. Are there any answers to that? We work with a lot of customers, right? And a lot of them recognize the need for technology, right? And there is, so for example, Dr. Koshi's organization is, I think one of the more progressive ones. But there are a lot of people who say technology and don't really bet on it, right? Technology, or don't really believe in it, right? It's just a buzzword. Because what technology means is change in the way you're working, right? And that people are not willing to do. So technology is, I think, today more about mindset than about anything else. And that is where, the whole thing of advocacy and of getting people to understand and firmly, inherently believe that technology is really the solution and start thinking about what it means to have technology is extremely important. I don't think that recognition, and I have had discussions with people at very high level and at people on the ground. I don't think there's a genuine recognition. It becomes a sort of a gimmick, and that's the real danger. The third, I think, a linked point which I generally want to mention is designing for scale, right? And in scale is relative, right? In India, scale means if you're not doing a few million people, you're not scaling, right? And to do that, you have to think differently. And that we have to be prepared to, and that's again a mindset issue. I think to build an organization that trains, 500 people versus 5,000 versus 100,000 versus 1 million is very different approach. The mindset is different, right? And that's a key, and I think that's where mindsets needs to change. We work a lot of people understand that, but I think there needs to be a much wider recognition. So people, when we say technology, I'd encourage everybody to think about what it means to use technology. Right? Technology is not about, putting a few videos or putting a few graphics, which is what really it's come down to. And that's the least, as the easiest part, right? I think how it integrates with learning and how does learning happen and how it can integrate with a business process with a link to an outcome, I think that part is completely, underexplored, right? So those, 2-3 broad points that I wanted to mention. And then the way I look at sort of a scalable model of delivery, my model has 4 components, right? The first one is curriculum, right? What are we trying to, the what of teaching? And I'll again use an example from English language. We 200 years ago, we had English as a foreign language, right? That means everybody was benchmarked against a native speaker. So if you were in India or any other country, you were benchmarked against a native speaker, and you were always inferior, therefore, right? And that was, so there's a way of putting you in your place. Then, as the British sort of expanded and we became colonies, so they needed a local sort of a cadre that could communicate between them and the local population, right? And then English was second language was born, right? English as a second language. Now you've got a situation where we don't need. Most of us will never go and have a cup of tea with the Queen of England. We don't need English for that purpose. What we need English, and a lot of other skill, like I said, I'm just using English as an example, is to perform a job, get a job, or perform an activity in a job, right? And that's a very different way of thinking, right? And that's a very different way of designing, right? I've seen a lot of English language solutions that there are, say people are teaching the same thing to adult markets, teaching the same thing to a student market. That's crazy, right? You can't do that because everybody learns differently. The type of voiceovers, the type of media and images, all that is very, very different, right? So there's a curriculum aspect. Now, having heard the bell, I'm going to rush through the second point, which is technology. I've talked about that, except to say that I think technology needs to be contextual. It needs to be related to that environment. For example, we deliver our program, across satellite, internet, intranet, CD-ROM, computer-based, and across platforms, Windows, Linux, different hardware, so tons of stuff, right? You can't, one size does not fit all. Right, so technology has very different implications. Media already talked about, that's a third pillar. You need to use contextual voiceovers and all of that. That's actually the easier part, even though it's not followed. But the last piece, I just want to end with this, is the impact, is the delivery, is what are you measuring for? What are you putting all the technology? In some of the schools I've seen, there are 20 computers, 500 students. Each student has the potential of accessing that computer for maybe 30 minutes in a week. Right? Is that going to be effective? Does that serve anybody's purpose? I'm not sure at all. Right? So what do you do? How do you measure the outcome? I think a lot of time is spent in putting the hardware and the software and not enough on focusing on the learning process. What is measuring the impact of what you've taught, measuring the impact on the student, and how it's been taught. So, there's one message I wanted to leave you with today, and my time is obviously running out, is that we need to move away from a software, hardware thinking and add to that impact assessment, a delivery impact assessment. Thank you very much.